I hope. And how do I enable the chat? Just I want to make sure. Okay, excellent. Oh, okay.
And how do I enable the chat?
Okay, hi guys, it's Frankie-Lou. I just had to get a little bit of technical support there to get started. So I'm coming to you today from the greenhouse in the sky here in Golden. And can I ask that you have that down low because it's really messing with. Okay, sorry about that. Still getting the hang of using all this technology. I'm actually far more proficient at dirt and soil than I am at technology. So I hope that you're going to join us here today or watch us later. And today's subject I thought was pretty appropriate considering some of the stuff that's going on in the world today, and that is food sovereignty. So first off, I've called this sowing the seeds of sovereignty because seeds are so important. Seeds, I like to refer to them as perfect little promises for your next harvest, because each of these tiny little things, like seeds, they're so tiny, but every single one of them contains all the genetic potential for an entire living being that will be able to nourish us both body and soul. Okay, so I love seeds, and seeds really are focus of what I do. I really enjoy sowing seeds of knowledge, sowing seeds of food for food, and hopefully inspiring people to do some of this yourself. One of the reasons that my son and I started this channel so many years ago now is because we were in the middle of a global pandemic, and we really wanted to help people see that if his middle-aged mom and him, who was only, I think, 10 or 11 at the time, could grow much of our own food. We wanted to help others learn to do that as well. We weren't as panicked about some of the changes that were going on in the world at the time, because we knew that we had the ability to grow a lot of our own food ourselves, and to preserve a lot of our own food ourselves, and to share with our family and friends. And that really gave us, while the world was going crazy and a lot of people were experiencing a lot of hardship, we actually we enjoyed some of that time because we were able to focus on our little family and growing community and growing food and learning. So that with what's going on in the world today, I thought it might be a good time to talk about how we can embrace some of those ideals again and use some seeds to grow a community of people who are supporting one another and protecting our food supply. So that's my little spiel to start. I also have very, very strong feelings about this subject in particular, because while I do spend all of my time pretty much growing and teaching about growing, my academic background is in archaeology and history. I've got degrees in that, focusing on the colonization period in our Canadian past. And what I see now happening with the neo-colonial food industry is very, very troubling for me, because it's very similar to what happened in the colonial period here in Canada, here in North America. So I'm going to make a few, if you're wondering what is she talking about, I will make a few little references here and there to how this is also reflected in our past. I try to learn a lot from our past. I am constantly looking back at history to see where we had growth, where we made renewals, and also where we had challenges and where we had failures. And I'm trying to repeat the good stuff and trying not to repeat the bad stuff, if that makes any sense. I just want to make sure that I've got my, I just wanted to make sure that I have my chat enabled. Okay. So, and as I'm going along, I could sit here and talk about this for a whole day if I had to, but I also am really eager to see if you have any questions because I'd really love to address those as well. So while I will focus a lot on food sovereignty and growing community and growing food and how you can learn to do that better, if you have any specific gardening questions, maybe from some of the stuff you've seen in our Facebook in our Facebook groups, or if you have questions about how we're building this wonderful greenhouse so that we can better provide food to our family and friends throughout the year. This is a 4-season greenhouse now. Please feel free to chime on in there because I'd love to chat with you about that as well. So first off, I'm going to talk about monoculture. This is probably one of my least favorite subjects to discuss because I feel like monoculture is one of the huge problems that our world faces today. And when I talk about monoculture, most people see that as the practice that is prevalent in the world tonight, that is very prevalent in the world today with the agricultural food industry, where you find it, you get a huge field and you decide there's one crop that you're going to grow and you're going to grow that en masse, all ripening at once, easy to harvest at once, and you're going to keep growing. If you find that that's a good crop to grow there, you're going to keep growing that same crop over and over and over again in that area. You're going to, and one of the a major reason that this is done by the food agricultural industry is it's easy to harvest everything at once. It's easy to plan ahead, and it's often touted as the road to food security, that monoculture is the way that we are going to be able to grow enough food for the population of this world, and it's the only way to go. But there's a huge problem with that, and that when it comes to food, and that is this: by doing this monoculture, we're reducing the biodiversity, both of the food crops that are available to us and the biodiversity of the soil and the land that the soil is grown on. Well, that the food is grown on. Because when you deal with monoculture, there tends to be one thing that is grown. So a good example here in Canada would be huge canola fields or huge wheat fields where nothing else is growing in that except that same crop over and over and over again. And when you do that, you have to use artificial outside stimulants to continue to make that crop grow, because every single plant takes different things away from the soil and puts different things in. And if you're going to keep growing, say wheat, over and over again in the same quarter section, which is very rare these days, actually, these farms tend to be much larger than that, you are depleting the soil, and you're going to need to use fertilizers. And the other thing that's going to happen is the pests that like to eat that crop know that crop is there, and you're going to have to use a heck of a lot of pesticide, and also weeds will tend to develop alongside that crop, and you're going to have to use a lot of herbicide. So what you're doing is you're basically killing the soil. Soil is a living thing. When I'm teaching children, I love to take a handful of soil and hold it up and say to them, how much life do you think there is in here? Is this dead or alive? And telling them and letting them know that in one handful of soil, there's more living beings than there are on the whole planet of humans. There's like 7 billion entities in a handful of soil. It's just a lot of it is really small and microscopic. We got your bacteria, your fungi, and also some of the smaller animals that are in there. And these things that are what are feeding our plants, because they are nourishing the soil by breaking down the matter or the organic matter that goes into the soil, and also the minerals that's in the soil, and feeding it to the roots of our plants. So by maintaining the biodiversity of the soil, you're actually you're helping your plants to be more resilient to change. It makes them more drought resistant if there's a really healthy mycelium network in there. But if you're using herbicide and pesticide, you might as well say goodbye to all of that. that biodiversity is gone. And the only way you will be able to maintain crops on that soil is through artificial application of fertilizers and maintaining this cycle, which is just further deadening. Okay, so that's what monoculture will do in the long term. It might be able to provide a huge whack of food suddenly that you can harvest and take to market, but it's not going to make that land capable of growing food sustainably for an extended period of time. And we've really embraced monoculture here in Canada, and it makes me very sad because I have friends who've come from other parts of the world, like India, for example, where monoculture was practiced before it was practiced here. And there are entire states, well, I'm not sure if it's a state or province, I'm sorry for my ignorance about that, but that are dead now. The soil is dead. They can't do anything with it. They're trying to bring it back to life. Nothing will grow there anymore. And it would break my heart to see that happening here in Canada. So that's the food aspect problem of monoculture. But I also like to refer to it as monoculture flattening our culture, because I don't know about you, but for me, food is a source of celebration. It's a source of our culture. I can't tell you how many times I feel closer to my family because we're sharing food together. And I love learning more about my friends' cultures by eating the food that's traditionally theirs. And when you are growing the same crops over and over again, and all of a sudden you only are able to get 2 kinds of rice, or you're only able to get 1 kind of wheat, or you're only able to get 3 kinds of tomatoes at the grocery store, that's deadening your culture. Because I have friends, for instance, who live part-time in Mexico and grew up in Mexico. That's where they're from. And they can't find their traditional Mexican peppers anymore in their local market when they go home, because it's not as economically viable to grow that as a large crop. So there's less variety available to them, and they feel like they're losing their culture and want to grow more at home. I seem to have a chat that's not showing up for me. Sorry, what's the chat question? Okay. Okay, this is a stream. Okay, diversity of stock. Yes, diversity of stock. Hello, Hedgecraft. It's wonderful to see you here. My advice for transplanting the tender squash pumpkins hate moving. Oh, a question about, yes, transplanting squash. I know that this is a different, but you know what? It actually isn't inappropriate, because guess what? Squash is part of our Canadian and America's heritage. A lot of people aren't aware that so many of the crops that you eat actually are from the Americas initially. This is all part of our colonial heritage as well. And and squash is one of them. I will get to the squash transplanting in just a second. But when it comes to our food that we think of traditionally European, for instance, Italian food, most people immediately start thinking about their peppers and their tomatoes and eggplant, stuff like that. Oh, please be careful. Nope. Sorry, we're trying to get the chat enabled on my side, and for some reason it's not working right now, but that's okay. I've got somebody who can let me know what the questions are. But tomatoes weren't introduced to Italy until the 16th century. You know, after the end of the 15th century in 1494, I should know this as a historian, shouldn't I? When the ships started coming across the ocean for the basically to try to shorten up the spice trade. So once again, colonialism almost started as a result of trying to get to food. They just got a whole bunch of food they weren't expecting, because all those nightshades that we love to eat, peppers, tomatoes, potatoes are from here. Well, from the Americas. They're more from the South America region, but none of these crops were available in Europe until they came over here. Okay, so food, colonialism and food are very closely, like, it's all in there. And we want to ensure that we're protecting our culture and not allowing monoculture to all make us the same by celebrating the foods that you think help to make you who you are culturally. And one of the best ways you can do that is to grow it. So squash. Yes, squash really don't like transplanting. I do a lot of my, in fact, I do a heck of a lot of my growing in milk jugs. Even here in the greenhouse, I do a lot. When I am choosing, now, when I'm growing here and I'm growing squash here, I basically do straight seed because I can do that here. I don't have to worry about a short season. But when I'm growing at my Springbank homestead and I'm growing squash, I start them in the milk jugs with the cheat method. Usually I don't start them until April, just outside of Calgary with our crazy Chinook conditions, and I only put them outside when it's not freezing. But when it comes to taking squash out, I don't overplant. That's critical. Sometimes if I have tons and tons of milk jug, I will plant one squash plant or plan to clip back, like put 3 in there, like the same as when it says on the seed pack for a squash thing, plant 3 in a hill and save the best one. You can do that in a milk jug as well, or whatever you are choosing to plant them in. And then I literally cut the sides down on the milk jug and I plop the whole thing in, because you're right, squash seeds hate to be disturbed. I used to rip them apart and stuff and then wonder why they were taking so long to adjust. But now when I do transplanting a squash, I try it. I would rather sacrifice a pot, or like a, if I'm not using milk jugs, or a milk jug, and cut out the whole thing, as opposed to sacrifice one of my beautiful little seedlings. I also ensure that even in the milk jugs, that they're open for a couple of days before putting them in the ground, so that the plant is not, it's the same as hardening off, because that I'm not taking it in and out. But there is an adjustment that your plants make when you're transplanting them out of the milk jugs, that you want to ensure they have an opportunity to adjust to the humidity, change in humidity. Okay, so let me know if that wasn't clear enough, and I'll continue to address that. But in the meantime, I'm going to go back to this colonial perspective. So how can we stop monoculture from happening and deadening our food supply? Because, for instance, I know from all of my history and also from propaganda and seeing the old posters, the one thing that when we were in wars previously, when our nations were at war, the government was busy telling people, grow as much food as you can. And there's a good reason for that. It takes a lot of the world's resources to transport food all over the place. And if you've got people who are growing more of their own food in their own homes, then you can expend some of your resources on getting stuff to people who are actually off fighting the wars. So we're in a different kind of scenario now. It's a different kind of war that we're currently involved in. We're involved in a trade war, it appears, or we're tinkering on it, back and forth, wavering back and forth on it. And everybody's talking about buying local. And buying local is extremely powerful, but there's nothing more powerful than growing local and growing in your own backyard. Because when you stop having to get your resources from externally, you can focus on some other things that are more important, maybe spending your money on things that are a little bit more difficult to get right now, if you're growing more of your own food yourself in your own yard or within your community. That's another thing. No man is an island. And when it comes to food sovereignty, growing community is just as important as growing food, because you will find that you have people in your neighborhood and within your community who can grow things that you can't. Okay. Oh, and that's my, yes, Jennifer, you're right, Victory Gardens. Hi, Jennifer, wonderful to see you here. That's exactly what they were called. They were called Victory Gardens, and the gardens that we were, that our relatives were expected to grow during war, and we can continue to grow those today. So Learning to grow your own food and learning to grow community is really important in times like these. So what are some things that you can do? Well, I personally spend a lot of my time reading and researching and out here experimenting. The amount of time I spend playing in the dirt, literally trying to learn more about how to be more productive. And I learn something every single day. I've been homesteading now for 12 years, but I still learn something every single day. And so taking the time to do that, to spend your time out learning, reading, talking to your neighbors, joining gardening groups, joining your local horticultural society, getting involved in things like seed swaps. These might seem trivial, but they're absolutely essential. I'm involved in a sweet seed swap here in Golden. I'm very excited about it. If there's any locals, there's going to be a wonderful seed swap next Saturday down at the Civic Center, where basically a bunch of folks in this Golden area who are growing food, we're saving seeds and swapping them with other members of the community, and that is ensuring the biodiversity and crop resilience of the food supply here in Golden. There's a reason for this. When you save seeds that are grown in your own community, the seeds, and if you save from the plants that are the strongest, the best tasting, the most productive, what's going to happen is you are going to have seeds that have sort of developed to thrive in your conditions. So I would much rather get a pack of tomato seeds that I know that my buddy Will has harvested, because he's a darn good tomato grower and he knows how to save seeds properly, even if it says, like, let's say it's green zebra seed that I can get from Will, or green zebra seed that I can get from a really reputable seed supplier like even West Coast Seeds. I'm gonna get the ones from my buddy, because I know he grew those plants here in these conditions, and those seeds are going to be far more capable of thriving here than just some random seeds that were grown in, say, my hometown of Ladner, where West Coast Seeds is. I love my hometown of Ladner, but if I have a choice between seeds that are grown in Golden and seeds that are harvested in Ladner for growing in Golden, it's better to have those seeds. That might not seem like it would make a difference, but it really, really does. Maintaining the biodiversity of the crops that thrive in your area is super important. There are certain, I like to say that when I moved homesteads, I sold my original Grow Together homestead almost 2 years ago now, and moving just 10 kilometers away, the differences in how my crops adjusted, what thrived and what didn't thrive, was pretty dramatic. So the more local you can get and the more you can support local endeavors to grow food and save seeds, the better off you're going to be and the more resilient your crops are going to be. I got another one here. Seed swaps are the best. Another thing, they are awesome. I love them. Another thing that's really great about seed swaps is you get to meet people who are just as strange as you are and just as obsessed with growing things as you are. If you're like me, I feel like I find my tribe whenever I go to one of those things, because normal people don't want to hear me talk about things like seeds for hours, but there it's like, hey, it's kind of, it's normal behavior. So yes, if you're interested in growing food, if you haven't done it yourself, even going to one of those seed swaps to start, because that's where the knowledge is going to be. It's not just seed swaps aren't just about sharing seeds, it's about sharing knowledge. You are going to get to meet the people who grow the best freaking squash you've ever tasted. And I can't wait to see Evie, who is our wonderful local squash grower here. And I'm so excited about getting my hands on some of his seeds, because I know I'm going to learn a lot just in the 5 minutes I'm there at his table about some of the conditions for growing the seeds there. So that's another thing, is learning. These seed swaps are a great way to learn as well. And maybe you've got conditions on your property where you can grow excellent tomatoes, but for some reason choys and kales and greens don't do as well there. Usually you can start exchanging food as well. When I grow food, I grow an excessive amount of food. People are always like, are you planning on feeding an army? And I'm like, an army of gardeners? Yeah, if I have to. I also preserve so that I can have that freshness from my garden year round. I do a lot of different preserving. I've learned from people and I've taught myself a lot of different things. And um, if you get to know your community, you get to learn what the different skills are within your community. Things, food that you can swap, skills that you can swap. Those are the things that are going to help your community thrive and survive during a crisis that could be like we had during the global pandemic there. Having friends who I knew I could swap things with was very helpful. I very rarely had to leave my homestead and I was able to build a community of people and we helped each other. Okay, so that's another important thing. Now also when it comes to the biodiversity, that's important because when you go to the grocery store, a lot of kids, because I do a lot of school programming, one of the things I like to do when I'm taking them into an area is show them different colors they haven't seen. Because, for instance, most children assume a carrot is orange, and they assume a tomato is red. They assume that a pea is green. These are all things that they've learned from going to the grocery store and seeing what's put on their plate. But there is a huge range of variety of things that you will never see in the grocery store because it's not beneficial to grow those in large quantities and harvest. Like have a lot of friends who are at farmers markets and they grow wonderful different varieties of lettuce, and sometimes they can't sell things because it's not the color people expect. People are expecting to see green lettuce. Sometimes it's really hard to get somebody even to try a red lettuce, let alone a purple one or one that's speckled red and black. But these can be some of the tastiest things you'll ever have. So when you're growing things in your own garden, you can maintain some diversity and you're not going to be counting on, if there is a major change, say suddenly the temperatures go up a couple of degrees, that could be extremely harmful to these monoculture crops because they are grown expecting a certain consistent, everything has to be the same for monoculture to work. By maintaining all this genetic diversity, we're actually helping to maintain the resiliency of our food crops. An example of that would be, as I said, I grew up in a farming community in Delta, BC called Ladner. And we had a farm where literally the conditions were fantastic. If you drop something in the soil, a seed in the soil is going to grow, okay? And it's going to produce a lot of good food. Where I then moved to Calgary, where conditions were not anywhere near the same, and they were extremely erratic. And I just found that I just wanted to grow some nice beans and some nice peas, and everything was getting hardy and, well, getting woody. But I started growing a purple bean because I thought it was pretty, and it turned out the purple bean was so much more resilient and actually thrived in my Calgary conditions. The purple peacock bean, if you're looking for a bean that's going to do well. Just had purple carrots for dinner. Yes, they're delicious, aren't they? I really like the white carrots. They're really good for roasting. So maintaining those colors, sometimes those colors are representative of another genetic trait that might make it more resistant to erratic changes or something that's coming along. Sometimes a different color, it's tagging along with some other genetic traits that might make that crop more resistant. I grow purple peacock beans every year now, even here in this greenhouse because they are delicious. And I know that no matter what happens, like let's say we do have, it's been wonderful maintaining consistent conditions in here. It's just incredible. But if we were to have some erratic things happen, I know that purple peacock beans are going to do well. Okay, I've got another question here. Anyone hear why broccolini seeds are non-resistant this year? I've been watching you since you started. I'm also ready for apocalypse. Yeah. Okay, so broccolini, you haven't been able to get a hold of them. I got mine from West Coast Seeds this year, but that isn't a, it's Jen, right? It's Jen. And hi, Jen. I know I do appreciate it because you often do comment on things, so it's wonderful to hear from you. I'm trying a new experiment. It kind of gave me goosebumps because I've been obsessing with broccolini this year because it is such an amazing productive crop. I did get some from West Coast Seeds. I believe another good supplier of that is Ontario Seed Company. Yes, Ontario Seed Company. I was going to buy it from bulk from them. So check them out. They did have broccolini seeds when I looked a couple weeks ago. But I have been trying to get my broccolini to grow seeds, and I've actually, I don't know if you can see it, there's a few plants back there that are still, I'm still trying to produce seeds from, but they don't seem to be viable because I think it's because they are a hybrid. So I'm cloning my broccolini. Yes, it's very exciting. I'm taking cuttings and I'm rooting them so that I don't have to be reliant on seeds anymore. And that's another option actually I should talk about is have lots in peace country in the wild. Have lots in peace country. Lots of broccolini. Well, that's cool. It is a hybrid, so it's great that you're getting that in the wild. But I'm finding that I'm having a lot of fun with the cloning. So that's another thing. If you're really getting into the science behind growing, seeds can sometimes be, for instance, here's a perfect example, herbs. Herbs are notorious, especially really fragrant ones, of you put this, because especially when you're sticking with open pollinated heirloom seeds, they do tend to breed true to the parent plant, but there can be some genetic diversity within that. As you know, if you've grown 5 of the same tomatoes, you might notice that each of those tomato plants has some different changes. Well, it's very, very apparent when it comes to herbs. One of my most favorite herbs is lemon thyme. And whenever I've tried to grow that from seed, I find that it's not as fragrant as I like. So I tend to clone that. There's nothing wrong with cloning plants if you're using them for your own purposes. I know a lot of people get upset about because there are actually plants that have patents on them, but that doesn't tend to ring true for food plants. It's more for some of the showier flowers that have been developed for show purposes. But if you take a cutting and you root it from up, like what I do is they think I'm crazy at garden centers because as soon as I see the fresh herbs come up, I'm in there and I'm literally picking up the lemon thyme and I'm putting my face in it and I'm rubbing it and I'm seeing how fragrant it is, because the more fragrant it is, I want to pick the smelliest lemon thyme plant I can, and then I'm going to take it up and clone it so I can put it into the beds. Cloning that is a way of ensuring that you are guaranteed to have exactly the same result as the mother plant because it's genetically the same. Whereas the seeds that the lemon thyme that I purchased and planted, they're not all the same, and I might only get 1 or 2 really fragrant plants. Whereas I know if I buy one, cut it, and clone it, I'm going to have as many fragrant plants as I like. Does that make sense? So cloning is another way that you can also ensure the genetic viability. Like if you're at a friend's house and they have a wonderful plant that you're not getting the same kind of plant, maybe ask if you can take a cutting. Okay, always ask. Do not think you can rampage around your neighborhood. This is not a good way to grow a community because I know people who actually go into other people's yards and take cuttings without asking. That is a sure way to ensure that you are making your community smaller and not like you. Okay, I got another question here. Okay, Wild Nature Farm. Pin cherries are the hardest to find right now. All of the wild populations have disappeared, and the sellers are all out of stock near me in Alberta. Ooh, that's a bummer. I haven't seen, um, I have not seen pin cherries myself, actually. That's kind of sad. So that's something that if you do find, it might be very valuable to get a hold of and see what you can do. There's another, sorry, I'm just going to read this one because for some reason it's not turning up on here. And I have to hold it this far away because I'm in, past the half-century mark here. People are not dealing with black knot and wild chokecherries. Oh, Anchor of Hope Ranch. You're probably absolutely right. Black rot and is terrible. Black knot is terrible, and if you don't take care of it, you could end up destroying some stalks. So that's a good point. Chuck, but not the pin cherries. Most hascups and sour cherries are planted as well as ornamental shrubs. Yes, but hascup is also a native plant. Okay, hascups grow here, well, in Alberta naturally, so you can sometimes find those. I haven't cloned shrubs so much. I'm more of a person who clones my. I was cloning squash earlier this year, and as I said, I'm also cloning. Pardon? Oh yes, yes, with the black knot. If you do, we had a small invest at Grow Together Homestead 1. If you do happen to see black knot on your plants, okay, and it does tend to show up on some of your fruit-bearing trees, and I can't remember what the other, I'm sorry, I can't recall what the other one is. We actually got a fire going, and we would take the branch and put it directly in the fire. We didn't even let it touch the ground, okay? Because it's rampant once it gets into, so you want to burn that. If you happen to see black knot on one of your trees, you want to take as much of that off as it's terrible. It looks like one of my friends said it basically looks like crap on a tree. And that is what it looks like. And so you want to cut that off and you want to burn that. Try not to allow it to touch the ground, because remember how we talked about the biodiversity of the soil? That is one, I think it is a form of fungus. I'm not sure about that. That's one form that you do not want spreading its mycelium out around in your yard. So if you do, one way that you can help to protect your food diversity in your community is to ensure that you're taking care of any diseases that you see in your community on your own yard, because you do not want that spreading out within your yard. Another example that's really, really common, and almost every gardener comes across it if they choose to grow squash and cucumbers, is powdery mildew. I love composting. I'm always composting, and hopefully next week we can show you the compost pile that we're building in here. But one thing I don't compost is any leaves that have powdery mildew. I get a fire going outside and I put it straight out there, because you don't want those diseases spreading through the rest of the food crop. If it gets into a building like this, you're going to have a huge problem. It's not as prevalent when you're growing outside in a garden, but I have seen it even in external gardens. Take those leaves off. Do not put them in your compost pile. Get rid of it. I like to burn it. If you don't have that option, I know I'm a huge fan of composting, but I would not compost or use as mulch any leaves that have disease on them. Okay, you do want to try to keep that away. Okay, so I've been talking about a few different things, but I do love these questions. Thank you for putting them in your comments. I do really appreciate them. Let's say you can't grow food, or you can't grow a lot of food. That doesn't mean you can't be part of the food sovereignty movement. Okay, a lot of people, I really know how fortunate I am to have all this wonderful space to grow and the ability to be able to do that. It's something I'm grateful for on a daily basis. But you can be involved in the food sovereignty movement even if you are living in an apartment in downtown Calgary, or maybe you don't have any space to grow things in your own little where you're living, but you can still be involved by supporting people who do. Especially with the prices of groceries these days, I very, very rarely purchase fresh produce from the grocery store anymore for multiple reasons. But I go to the farmer's market. By supporting those large, when I don't have it growing here, I'm hoping that's going to be reduced a little bit, but I still try to be part of that community because I want to support that community. I find that When I go to the farmer's market, I get way more variety, way more color and taste in that food. It's more nutritious because it's been grown, not been grown in a monoculture environment. So that soil has got the biodiversity within the soil. It's feeding the nutrients to the plants naturally, and therefore you're going to have food that's actually richer in nutrients. There's usually far less packaging involved. You're also not talking about crazy transportation costs if it's a local farmer's market, transportation resources. But the other thing is by supporting those farmers who are growing food locally, you're ensuring that they can continue to do that. Even if you can't grow food yourself, supporting local farmers and local producers is huge because it's usually a small time production, and and lately, honestly, even pricing. I just as an example, I in Springbank, the closest food source that I have to buy food from is the Calgary's Farmers Market, and in there I go in there, and if I spend about $40 on vegetables, I have so many vegetables because they always have things like you can choose 5 of these things for $20, or if you get a huge bag of cucumbers and a huge bag of tomatoes, that's $12. Well, if compared to grocery store prices, it's it's close and sometimes cheaper than the grocery store, and the quality of the food that I'm getting is so much better. And I know that I'm supporting those people who have grown to really like, because you see them day after day, and you know those are the people who are actually growing that food. You can ask them questions. You can find out more about your food. The more you know about your food, the more you're going to be finding out what it is you like to eat and what you like to support. So supporting those local producers is a huge step you can take in food sovereignty, even if you're not able to grow yourself. Okay, so I know that some people just can't. You might be infirm, or maybe you're living in a assisted living place, well, or in a senior's home now, and you don't have a yard anymore. If you can still get access to those local foods growers, that's going to help. I know that, for instance, I've spent a lot of time, and I do a lot of my work in Cochrane. The farmers market in Cochrane, that is every Saturday during the summer, is phenomenal. You get to actually, that is last year, I purchased half a cow from one of the local producers, and I will never buy beef from a grocery store again. It was a bit of an investment, but the meat I'm getting from that source is phenomenal. It's much better than anything I've ever purchased from the store. And in the long run, it's actually turning out to be cheaper. Yes, it was a big spend, but there's more than half of it still left. And it's amazing product. And I know that that's helping that small farm and the gentleman who sold it to me, and helping him raise his kids. So by doing that, you buying local and growing local, it's not just about um, us being in the middle of a trade war. It's also helping to protect your food sources externally for if other things are going on. It builds resilience, and you're helping to grow community, which is just as important as growing the food itself. It looks like I've got another comment here. No? Okay, sorry. So that's one thing I'm going to suggest. And also, it's a much more pleasant experience to go to a farmer's market than it is to go to Real Canadian Superstore. I go there when I have to. Another thing, though, when it comes to learning, take advantage of bounty. When there is bounty, um, buying things that are when they're fresh and ready, and when they're seasonal, you can get much better pricing. You just have to learn how to preserve it. And there are all sorts of different ways to preserve foods. Most people do tend to think automatically canning, and canning is fun. I love canning. One of the most satisfying noises in the world to me is hearing a jar ping when it's sealed properly. But you can dry. You can, and now there's the whole besides just regular dehydration, there's also freeze drying. You can, I like to dry and do a lot of spices that way. there's fermentation, which not only is that a great way of preserving food, it's also a way of building the biodiversity of your tummy for better health as well. So if you start looking into those things, there's so much satisfaction in being able to take fresh food that's grown locally and eat it year round, even if it's only available in the fresh form seasonally. Freezing is good as well. And it's a way of ensuring that you're not going to have any waste. Another thing you might want to do with monoculture, there's this whole idea that basically monoculture is based on the idea that you plant once, harvest once. But so many of the plants that we grow in our gardens are not a harvest one and done scenario. Almost, unless it's a head lettuce, and even in some of those cases, for instance, greens, almost every single green I know is what would be referred to as cut and come again. Okay, and what that is if you're growing a lettuce here, sorry, I should have had the camera. I'm growing a lot of lettuce here. And as they start, I'm not harvesting entire heads of lettuce. What I'm doing is I'm taking outer leaves, and the plants continue to grow. And when you do that, you can make one lettuce provide 4 meals instead of 1, because you're just continuing to allow it to grow. So that sort of goes on to back to the seeds. Another thing you want to do is you don't want to harvest plants when they seem like they're done. What I do when I've got companion plant combos in each of these beds, and I'm always keeping an eye on what looks like the best thing that's producing in here. For instance, if I'm looking at greens, I think I'm growing 10 different kinds of lettuce in here. I'm very excited because one of the new varieties I'm growing this year is Freckles. Freckles is an heirloom variety. It is black. It actually is green and black. It's beautiful and very delicious, and it's also very resilient. You will never see it in the grocery store because most people find the idea of eating black lettuce a little odd. I am a weirdo and I'm very excited about it. I'm going to keep an eye on my Freckles lettuce. When I find one that I know is spectacular, I'm going to leave it alone and I'm going to let it bolt and flower and dry out. And then I will harvest those seeds. I like to think of seed saving as a second harvest. It's remarkable how many seeds some plants can produce. This here is one head from one sorrel plant. Okay, sorrel is an amazing edible perennial, and it comes back year after year. This, from one seed, you will have a plant that will live for years and years and years and produce head after head of seeds. I don't think it would be overestimating to say that there's several thousand seeds here. So when you get into the practice of seed saving, it's remarkable. One pack of seeds can contain enough food to feed a lot of people if you're seed swapping and seed saving. Now, the second harvest, though, is going to go against some of the aesthetics that we've been taught in gardens, where they're all in neat, tidy rows and everything looks pretty, and once something bolts, you rip it up. I do the opposite. I actually, when I see a radish bolt or I see a lettuce bolt, I get really excited. It might not mean that I'm going to be eating the greens off that anymore, but I know that that's going to start developing flowers and then seed heads. And from one lettuce plant, lettuce seeds, they look like little dandelions actually, because they are related, so it's not funny. And that's also another thing I noticed with seeds, you can almost always tell what plant family something belongs to by looking at its seeds. Oh, I have a question here. Lots of plants self-seed too. Yes, I have a lovely patch of orache. Oh, you're speaking my language. Orache is one of my favorite greens. And those seed heads are actually so beautiful. Some people actually grow them as ornamentals to use in floral displays. But yes, orache does self-seed. That's one of the reasons some people don't like it, but I love it because it is a wonderful green. If you haven't tried orache yet, do so. It's amazing. It is a very abundant plant, and it's one of those ones you can't really find, I find it every once in a while in seed companies, but it's something that the monoculture food industry doesn't produce anymore, right? It's not something that you can harvest all one and done, but it can, one plant can produce food repeatedly. Just bought that freckles seeds. Good idea to save seeds. Yes, save some of those seeds, okay? And I hope you'll have to let me know if you like that freckles, because I have tasted it before and I'm very excited about it. And when it comes to seed saving, what I always say is you got to let it get ugly. You got to let it grow. You got to let it mature to its full potential till it's starting to dry out. Cucumbers, people always want to save their cucumber seeds, and they're often picking them when they're nice and pretty and edible. If you want a cucumber seed to save, you've got to let it get yellow, like, and bulgy. So that's a thing. A lot of what we think of as aesthetically pleasing is not good for seed saving. But if you want to have resiliency in your crops and be able, and let me tell you, there's nothing more satisfying than maintaining a life cycle over and over and over in your garden from seeds that you saved yourself, and being able to share those seeds within your community is huge as well. Okay, so you gotta sort of, so I find that it doesn't bother me because I'm not a tidy person. I think you could probably tell this is probably the tidiest it's gonna get in here. I'm not a very tidy gardener in the first, so it doesn't bother me letting things bolt. I've never believed in straight lines. I've always believed in polyculture, and plants supporting one another. Having 4 different kinds of plants growing in one space is something I've always done, and I practice through as long as I've been planting. But I also like having lots of flowers around. So having a few lettuces going, I get very excited. And if you really want to drive me crazy, you come and weed my garden when I'm not around. And then you might see some feisty Frankie-Lou showing up, because I actually sometimes get more excited about harvesting those seeds as I do about growing the original food crop. When it comes to maintaining your seeds, because this is important, if we're going to talk about food sovereignty, we have to build seed libraries in our communities. Okay, that's the next step, but in some ways that's the most important step. We need to share those seeds that grow well in our community, grow well in our conditions, to many people. So many people in our community are growing them, and then they'll be maintained. Jennifer, I saved my beets and parsnip seeds last year. Looking forward to planting them this year. You'll have to let me know how that's going to go, Jennifer. I'm very excited because I'm going to do my beets and carrots. My carrots are just starting to flower, so I'm super excited about that. And you'll definitely have to let me know how that turns out, Jennifer. I'm very excited about getting some parsnip seeds from the seed swap. That's next week. Okay, so seeds. A lot of people go way too far when it comes to preserving their seeds and making sure that they're going to last. They think they have to freeze them. They think they have to zip, air seal them and stuff. Seeds have been around for far longer than us, okay? Plants have been producing seeds without any of our help for millions of years, okay? So what they do, if you want your seeds to last, and a lot of people, when they buy a pack of seeds, it says, packaged in 2024, used by December 2025 or something like that. That's because they want to sell you another pack of seeds next year. Most seeds will last multiple years as long as they're stored properly. I find that the number one killer of seeds is humidity. So when I'm preserving seeds, what I like to do is make sure they're bone dry. Okay, sometimes I'll actually, if I've got a lot of seeds, I'll keep them in a jar first to see if any humidity is showing up on the jar. You know how that, I'll seal the jar and I'll see if I see any beads of water. If so, I'm drying them some more. And I preserve them in paper bags. I used to keep seeds in plastic bags because it was convenient and resealable, but I found that had some seeds go moldy that way because humidity got into it and then it molds. So keeping those seeds dry and well labeled is important. I'm a huge fan of those little coin envelopes because I can keep lots of, like, they're small and I can keep lots of those together. And that's what we're mostly using in the seed swap as well. Okay, Jan, how did carrot and beet go to seed last year? First time in 40 years. Excited to plant them this year. Aw, I'm so happy. Thank you, Jan, for saying that. I'm so happy you're saving seeds. I hope you find it as rewarding as I do. And I hope that those seeds are going to be shared within your community as well. You've made my day by telling you that. That really makes my day, Jan. So thank you for letting me know that. Okay, so thank you for everybody for tuning in. Next week, we're really quite excited for two reasons. We're going to have daylight saving times, which normally is not fun, but for these purposes, it's going to be great because it will still be light in here and we won't have to put all this artificial lighting up. So our intention is that for next week's live, same time, Saturday at 7, is we're going to cover a lot of the stuff that's going on here in the greenhouse, how my brilliant partner has designed this space, and also some of the things we've learned, because sometimes when you make a mistake, and it's me who's been making the mistake, not him, I find that I learn the most from the mistakes I make, right? I'm not going to do that again. And we're going to talk about some of the things I've learned about growing year round, and just some of the companion plants combos that work well, some of the design features that have been amazing. So if you're interested in that, tune in and continue to send questions. I will respond to questions that are on this live because it will be, it's going to be on YouTube and available. And if you put questions, even though we're not chatting now, I do respond to your questions. And as always, I hope you'll take this chance to grow together today. I'll try it again. I hope you'll take this chance to grow together today. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I love chatting and hearing from you guys. Talk to you later.